Today's Pirke Abot class is dedicated in loving memory and Lilui Nishmat, our beloved father, Rabbi Meir ben Rabbi Yekutiel, Javayer, Alava Shalom, by the Basal family. Please make berachot afterwards Lilui Nishmato. Today's Pirke Abot class is also dedicated in loving memory and Lilui Nishmat, Nurit Nushafarim bat Hanum v'Yehuda, by the Zamir family. And as well, make the berachot leilui nishmato. And as a refuah shlema for my father, Rabbi Yitzchak ben Sarah Doret. Refuah shlema for the nefesh, for the guf. Okay, let us begin. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer. Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Yaakov, used to say, Ha'oseh mitzvah achat, someone who does one mitzvah, konelo praklit echad. He acquires, or she acquires for themselves, praklit echad, one defense attorney, one angel advocate. Ve'haover avera achat, and someone who does one sin, konelo acquires for themselves, kategor echad, one angel accuser or prosecuting angel. Okay? Now, I want to first focus on what this means, but as always, we'll go through the Mishnah quickly and then go back and analyze it piece by piece. But what is it actually telling us? This word koneh. In Hebrew, the word koneh could mean to acquire, right? We find that word, in the English, in Hebrew nomenclature, when you speak about ani holech la'asot kniyot, I'm going to buy groceries. So koneh means to buy things. But the word koneh also has another meaning in the Hebrew language. Every single day in the Amidah, we say that God is koneh hakol. Koneh hakol does not mean that God owns a controlling interest in everything in the world. He didn't buy the world. He created it. Okay? So koneh could also mean to create. Koneh hakol means God was the creator of all. But what is interesting over here as well is that not only are we acquiring angels, but we are creating angels. That's pretty blooming amazing, if you think about that. You do a mitzvah, and it's not like God has an assembly line of angels. And Hashem is like, okay, angel 7249637 asterisk B212. You're assigned to Ronnie. It's not that they get assigned by God to us, that we bought them with our deeds, but rather that we created them with our deeds. So I want to talk about how this works, because I don't know about you, but I did not go to college to learn angel creation. I don't know how to make an angel. How is the Mishnah telling me that with my good deeds and conversely with my bad deeds, I'm creating malachim? What does that mean? We'll come back to that in just a minute. The Mishnah then carries on and says, Teshuvah u'ma'asim tovim, repentance and good deeds, kitris b'fnei hapur'anut, are like a shield. You have that word in Hebrew as well. Where do we find that word, tris? Anyone know? Exactly. All the windows in Israel have these blackout blinds. So you kind of let them down and the pieces slot together and they block out all the light from outside. So a tris is something which is a shield. Okay, so when a person does teshuvah and when they do good deeds, kitris b'fnei hapur'anut, they act like a protecting shield in front of punishment. Okay. We'll see exactly again how Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is communicating this concept. So that's the first part of the Mishnah. The Mishnah then continues with something which at first glance seems to be disconnected. Rabbi Yochanan HaSandlar Omer, Rabbi Yochanan, the sandal maker. Literally that's what it means. Sandlar, he was someone, he would stitch the sandals, and while he was making the sandals, he would study Torah and read out loud the words, the holy words of the Mishnayot, of the Gemara, of Kabbalah. As he was stitching, I would pay anything for a pair of those shoes. They have, there's Kol Han. That as usually you have a Kol Han, and then you have Kol spelled Kuf Vav Lamed. Kol, the voice, which is a special thing that as he was preparing it, he was doing it. We'll talk also one day a little bit about Rabbi Yochanan Sandlar and who he was, and therefore how it connects with what he teaches. He says, Kol Knesiyah, any gathering. That's where the word Knesset comes from, Bet Knesset, a house of gathering. Any gathering, Shehi L'Shem Shamayim, which is for the sake of heaven, Sofah Lihitkayim. In the end, it endures. V'she'ena L'Shem Shamayim. But a gathering, an organization, a company, a group, which is not L'Shem Shamayim, En Sofah Lihitkayim. In the end, it will not endure, it will not last. Why that is, we'll try and understand what is the connection between doing something or having a gathering L'Shem Shamayim and its endurance or its lasting power. We'll come back to that as well and see how these two parts of the Mishnah are connected. Okay, let's revert. Ha'oseh mitzvah achat. What is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov trying to communicate here? A lot of times, we like to use very general or colloquial terms to describe ourselves. Never more when we're forced to write some sort of abridged bio. Even the most confident person, ask them to write a bio about themselves. Yeah, Annie. We all want to vomit a little bit. It's hard. You ask someone to write of it for a dating website. Tell us about yourself. Shema Yisrael. It's hard. It's not easy. Talk about yourself. Get this all the time. You go speak somewhere and the rabbi's like, Rabbi, usually right before you get up on stage, he'll be like, how should I introduce you? I don't know. I'll turn around. You describe it. I don't know what you want me to do. I'm not going to tell you what to say about me. It's a very awkward situation, right? So we like using colloquial terms, very general ideas. I'm a nice person, right? I'm kind, we would hope someone would say about us. But not all of our interactions are kind, are they? When you yelled at the guy in the Uber, that wasn't kind. When steam was pouring out of your ears because someone said something that didn't match your political or your, moral sensibilities, and you kind of let him have it, you weren't being kind. But on the whole, I'm kind. We tend to think of ourselves in general terms, to describe ourselves in general terms. But unfortunately, that one person who leaves your restaurant a really bad Yelp review he's not always lying. Yes, generally your customer service is pretty good. But that one time when the person called and you had a really pretty bad day, and you were short with them on the phone, or you told them, please make a decision and call us back. And you were but it had nothing to do with them. And they leave a bad Yelp review. Were they lying about how the customer service in this organization or school or yeshiva or mikvah or God knows what there is abrupt? No, they weren't lying. You just like to tell yourself that generally you're not like that. That was an outlying comment. This Mishnah is communicating to us. It's saying something very powerful. Yes, although in general terms you might be a tzaddik, in general terms you might be kind, ultimately that doesn't make this person's user experience any better. And the reason why the Mishnah is teaching us this is not so that we can be hard on ourselves and call ourselves evil people, but to recognize that each human interaction that we have is important and it's valuable. And it doesn't get washed away because you had another experience or 10 that were positive. You still need to fix that one that wasn't. Says Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, that good deed that you did, you put something out there into the world. And I think that there's something very special. I remember watching a little while ago, fascinating story about a young man who was cursed slash blessed with autism. And I say cursed slash blessed because to a large degree, someone who has autism, again, understood properly, nurtured properly, given the proper guidance, it can be unbelievable blessing for that person in their life. They have levels of intelligence that us mortals sometimes can't begin to comprehend. So there was this entire TV show, you can Google it, you'll see, about a man who could do the most difficult mathematical equations in his head, down to like infinitesimal decimal points. And he would just say the number, and they asked him, how are you computing these numbers faster than a computer can? And he explained to them that he didn't see math as numbers. He saw math or numbers as colors. So when you take blue and yellow and you mix them together, it makes green. I don't see blue and yellow and magenta, if that's how you pronounce it, right? Lavender. I just see the resulting color, which is this shade of purple. So when I can see, and that's how the numbers, even at large numbers, down to decimal points, it was a specific shade of green or blue or chartreuse that he was able to pick up on. And that's how those numbers coalesced in his brain. It's not just autistic people who see numbers as colors, but I've met people who see people's auras, their feelings, their state of mind. They can sense it as a color. Fascinating. Again, our first reaction is to take a guy like that or a woman like that and just dismiss them as insane. But oftentimes what to you is insane is just another person's way of experiencing the world, the lens through which they see the world. And when you see the person more often than not is bang on correct, you start to wonder if maybe there's something that they're clued into that you're not. It was from that understanding that I began to see maybe what this Mishnah is talking about in a different light. You know, we think to ourselves that when we do an act of kindness, so I know that I did it, and maybe you know that I did it if I was kind with you, but nobody else knows that I did it. Yeah, God knows. And there's some kind of, notebook in the sky that everything is getting written into. But that's not how it is. That's not how it is. Imagine for a minute, just for a minute, imagine that every time you made someone feel kind, there's that warm feeling inside. Imagine if that warm feeling was actually measured by an increase in that person's body temperature. You gave a warm feeling, they went from 98.6 to 99.6. Could you imagine that? How about if I'm in a room with 1,000 people giving a class and I make the entire audience feel good about themselves? I've raised the temperature in the room 1,000 degrees. Could you imagine that? Yeah? That's what the Mishnah is communicating here. That you did an act, a mitzvah, a positive deed, you prayed, you gave tzedakah, you were kind, you forgave someone, you thought nicely about someone, you judged them positively, whatever it might be. In any one of the myriad ways a person can be good in this world, there's something that happens in the world around me that is real, that is quantifiable, it's measured. The Mishnah says, Oseh mitzvah achat, koneh lo praklit echad. You created an angel. What is an angel, as we've described numerous times before? The concept of an angel, Ronnie, what is it?
They stand on our behalf. They are defenders, or they are...
Excellent. So there's a defending nature of an angel, but that happens, one imagines, at a much later point in our future. Hopefully, I'm 42 years old, so I'm hoping that will be in 118 years, right? So that's when the angel is going to come into play, right? I don't know why I just gave myself 150 years to live, but you know what? I'll take it. I'll take my own.
It's a long time.
I guess I don't see numbers and colors, right? Yeah, but the remaining, the remaining amount of years that are left in my, 78 years left till I hit 120. Okay, that's a long time. I mean, that's a very bored angel. But that's actually not what the Mishnah is telling us over here. The Mishnah is telling us that this praklit, this positive angel, it exists from now. God doesn't write it down and then at a later point call the angel in to testify. That's not its only point or raison d'etre, okay? The reason why that angel exists is for each and every day that follows its creation. The Midrash David tells us something amazing. Every Friday night we sing a song. And how does it go? Eshet Chayil Mimtza. What does Eshet Chayil mean? A woman of valor. That's how we translate it. But that word is not only used for women. We find it in the Torah, right? Anshe Chayil. What does the word Chayil mean? Chayali means soldiers. Ish Chayal or Eshet Chayal means a woman of the army. Ish Chayal, Anshe Chayal means men of the army. The Midrash David says, because every man and every woman, unbeknownst to them, wanders the streets of this world with an army behind them. Could you imagine this? Let me give you a simple example. Let's say I'm the rabbi of a synagogue in Manhattan. Imagine, okay? I call up somebody and I say, I need some help. I'm trying to, put some money together for a toy drive for Chai Lifeline. Some of the people who are in your congregation who have heard your speeches might be inclined to give you a call and say, put me down for, I have some toys, I want to donate some money. If I ask people about the giving the gift of warmth program, we get responses. People send in gloves and socks and bags. Now, why are they sending it to me? A big part of the reason why you'll have influence is because of the army that stands behind you, right? The president of the United States that calls up another president and says, I would like to, arrange a meeting with you, right? The odds are the president is going to take his phone call because this man has 300 million people standing behind him. That's the army of the president. This community is the army that stands behind the rabbi of the community when he calls the hospital and asks them to release a patient before Shabbat. Or he calls a university and says there's a student who's trying to take an exam and the only date you'll let him sit the exam is on Yom Kippur. Well, I'm the rabbi of the Safra synagogue and I'm asking you to make an exception. This person is afraid that all the people that stand behind me and the influence that they have is going to cost the hospital or is going to cost the university if they don't listen to the demands or to the requests that I'm making. So too is the army of angels that walks behind us. In life, when something comes to stand in our way or to stand against us, it has to reckon with the army we've created. So if someone is trying to cheat us or hurt us or damage us or deny us a place in a school or deny us entry into a club, or ultimately what we have behind us is this army of angels that we've created. Rabotai, you hear that? Think about that protection. When a person is going into surgery, a lot of times they think to themselves, I'm going to ask people to say Tehillim. That's an army. In fact, I had on my WhatsApp, one of my WhatsApp groups was called the Izzy Army for Alava Shalom, a man in London who struggled but managed to survive long enough to communicate, to wake up from his coma, have that time with his family. They called, the WhatsApp groups were called Izzy's Army. Those prayers, they come with you into the operating theater, into surgery. But of course, there's no one who could do good deeds for you like you could do good deeds for you. It's a very different thing. Ultimately, are they my angels or are they yours? Am I borrowing them? Not only that, a lot of times a person can feel that things aren't going well. That's what's happening. He has, unfortunately, another army that he's created. An army that's trying to get him in trouble. An army that's trying to keep her or him away from opportunities in life. That's slamming doors in their face. Rabotai, I want to share with you a beautiful question. The Chafetz Chaim asks, the Torah writes, Lefetach chatat rovetz, right in the beginning of Bereshit. The Pasuk says with regards to Cain, it says, Im tetiv se'et. If you do well, you'll be elevated. You'll be raised. But if you sin, lefetach, at the entrance, chatat rovetz, your sin crouches. Ask the Chafetz Chaim. There are different words in the Hebrew language for sin. One word is chet. One word is avon. One word is pesha. Avon and pesha, like we all say, I don't know if you ever go to shul on Rosh Hashanah, on Yom Kippur, we have the Avinu Malkeinu, right? What do we say? Right? Forgive us. Chatanu, Avinu, Pashanu. What's the difference between those three? Loosely translated, Avon and Pesha are sins that we do on purpose. Chataim, a chet, is a sin that we do by mistake. Asks the Chafetz Chaim, why of the three did the Pasuk choose the one which is by mistake? It crouches, waiting to pounce, right? That's the intimation. It crouches, which? Your chatat, your sin. Why wouldn't you use the ones that I kind of did on purpose? Aren't those like more out to get me than the sins that I made by accident? That's the Chafetz Chaim's question, and he gives an answer. But I'd like to propose a different answer. You know, the Midrash David, he explains that not all angels are created equal. So when you create this force in the world, a force for good, you're making the world literally, not in a cliche way. You've literally, not figuratively, literally made the world a better place. You've increased kindness in the world. The result of that kindness is that there is more kindness, more people do good deeds, and as well that comes back to you as well, okay? But not all acts create the same kind of energy. An act that is driven by an immense amount of self-sacrifice. Even if the act is small, the impact and the angel, and when I use that term angel, I mean the force pushing the world and the environment around you to be better, and to be better to you, is enormous. You do an act that's good begrudgingly, even if it's a big act, but it's done with very little passion. That angel is a meh angel. The way I explain it to Ish, the way I explain it is, imagine you have an armed guard. He's got a gun on either side. He's got a gun on his what's it called? By his ankle, he's got an ankle pistol holster as well. On his back, he has a bazooka. That sounds like a guard you really want, right? But what if he's asleep? What if he doesn't care about his job? All of his firepower is for naught. So a person can do a huge mitzvah, but without any feeling, without any excitement, electricity, without any energy. So the force he's released into the world is a very impressive shell that doesn't want to get up out of bed in the morning, that doesn't want to change the world, that doesn't want to create ripples around him of kindness, compassion, altruism. So all angels are not created equal. When a person does a tefillah and they mumble their way through prayers, they got up vatikin in the morning, but they came and they're like, you know what happens? When it's time for the angel to speak on his behalf, whether in this world or the next, you know what the angel sounds like? Better to get an eloquent child than a mumbling, brilliant PhD. There's a young girl who's created probably more buzz for climate change than any PhD alive, than any scientist alive. Her name is Greta. I'm sure you've seen her. Why? Because she's incredibly eloquent. Because she's incredibly passionate. That passion, that energy, even though it's coming from a very small being, it shook the whole world. Remains to see what the world will do with that. But the point is when a person's changing the world around them. So think about this terminology. When you think about the fact that there's a lot of anger or resentment in my house, perhaps a way of changing that, changing the energy of the house, is by bringing kindness, compassion, a giving nature into my house. The easiest way is to change your children and your husband or your boyfriend or your roommate. That's the easiest way. You've changed it internally. But when you find them difficult partners, when you find it impossible to get them to engage, invite a SPH cooking demo into your home. Because you've changed the nature of your house by bringing chesed into your house. Bring in someone to talk about conflict resolution and creating shalom in the home. Have a shalom bayit class in your home. Even if your husband or wife doesn't listen to the class, you brought the energy, the angels of shalom bayit into the house. Is this clear? That's what the Mishnah is communicating to us. So I want to share. Maybe that's the answer to the Chafetz Chaim's question. The Mishnah says, the Pasuk says, if you do good mitzvot, las'et, im tetiv se'et, you'll get raised up. Your life will change, your mazal will change. But if you sin, lepeta chatat rovetz, your unintentional deeds sit crouching for you by the door. Es the Chafetz Chaim, why my unintentional ones? You know what the answer is? Because your intentional ones don't crouch by the door. They punch you in the face. They stab you in the gut. But the sin that you did when you weren't paying attention, right? When you hurt someone's feelings because you were busy with your phone, I didn't do that on purpose. What happened? It's by accident. I stumbled over it. Lepeta chatat rovetz. It doesn't crouch to pounce. It crouches so that when you walk out your front door, what happens? You fall over it. Its power as an angel is only as great as the power you gave it with your deed. And if your deed was you stumbling, then its power over you is to get you to stumble. This Mishnah is mind-blowing. So Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, if this is the case, that in a general sense I could be a good person, but if I've made certain mistakes, there's angels out there to get me. Right? And when we use the term angel, I still love remember this. This was so amazing. You know? There was this young girl who said, came to our house for Shabbat. And I still remember this as so new agey. She says, I don't believe in Judaism. We were like, okay. So you could tell that the parents were like, oh God. This was that kid in the family, right? So she comes and she's like, I don't believe in Judaism. I'm only here because my parents made me come. That kind of a tude, right? Anyway, okay, it's not my job to discipline anyone else's kids, right? We try to make everyone feel comfortable, feel happy in the house, but down on the other side of the table, so my kids are having a conversation with this girl. She's like, nope, I don't believe in it. I only believe, she goes, I don't believe in Judaism. My kids say, well, why? She says, well, I only believe in things that are scientifical. Those are actually words that came out of her mouth. That is scientifical. My daughter says, "Oh, so what do you believe in?" She says, "I believe in karma." So my kids are trained. My kids grew up in our house. They said, "Oh well, what's the scientific evidence for karma?" Like you don't believe that God can be proved, but you believe that karma can be proved. She's like, it's like obvious. She's like, karma means like that what you put out in the world comes back to you. And like like the world spins. So whatever you put out, obviously, it comes back to you. That was her scientific evidence for karma. That the world spins. Okay? So it was at that stage that I came to the other end of the table kind of nonchalantly and said, what you call karma, I call God. Just in your interpretation, it happens randomly, with no logical explanation whatsoever, with no direction whatsoever. And in my terminology, it happens because there's a force guiding it to do so. And if karma is driven by the gravitational spin of the earth, what caused the earth to have that gravitational spin? Some force did that, right? I call that force God. Can you believe in that God? And she's like, well, I guess so. Yeah. This idea that what we put out in the world is out there, and we don't get to take it back just because we felt bad. The process of teshuvah says, I take my inner self and I change me. That's what the process of teshuvah is. In fact, only this week in the synagogue, we had a person who changed their name on Shabbat. Now, I didn't read the entire prayer out loud because it's quite a long prayer, and I don't want to drag the tefillot out too long, but I read in the prayer, and in the prayer it says, a very special line. It says, if this and this person was decreed against them that they should not have a refuah shelema, they should not be healed, for this person, then you insert their new name, there is no such gezerah. And if this and this person was supposed to have bad mazal, for this person, their new name, there is no such decree. Now the commentators explain that the reason why changing your name helps is not because it's some sort of magic potion that you change your name and now you're safe, but rather because of the indelible imprint it makes on the person. When, as Rambam says, if I change my name, I think to myself, Eneni oto Adam, I am no longer the same person. I have a new name. I need to behave differently. So to speak, when a person does teshuvah, Rebbe Eliezer ben Yaakov says, these angels, that are the forces, the environment that I've created around myself, I've cut ties with that environment. I've moved away from that. I'm no longer that person. So although the deed actually happened, if I've gone and apologized, if I've gone and rectified that process, then that angel, those forces, they no longer have anything to do with me. I think a lot of times people think of teshuvah with regards to to Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur. I remember once walking into a supermarket, and in the supermarket it said, cereals aisle. Okay? Then it had, produce. Then it had, poultry, and meats. All the different aisles are labeled, each aisle for its own thing. And then there was one aisle, and it said, seasonal. And in this aisle was, wreaths for Christmas, all sorts of Xmas lights that you'd put up on your house, a couple of electric Hanukkah menorahs, some striped matzah meal, and these kind of things, and latkes preparation. And there were lots of things in this aisle that were designated as seasonal items. Yeah? Chocolate coins, seasonal item. I think some people think that teshuvah belongs in the seasonal item aisle. It's something that we think of on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. But teshuvah is something that a person thinks of or should be thinking of every single day. If you came to Shacharit in the morning in the synagogue, you'd see that after we do the silent prayer, there's a prayer that we say each and every day of the year, barring holidays. Anna Amonai. Chatanu, Avinu, Pashanu, Anachnu, Avotenu, V'Shevetenu. Ashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu, Dibarnu Dofi. That beating of the chest, it doesn't happen once a year. It happens, it's the default. Now, yes, you don't say Tachanun if it's Sukkot, if a baby is having a Brit Milah in the synagogue, if we have a Chatan amongst us, because that means that there's a celebratory day. It's a Yom Tov. On a Yom Tov, we don't do it. Ironically, one could argue that Teshuvah is a non-seasonal item. It's a default item. It's supposed to be something that's part of our day-to-day, so that when we are conscious of all this pollution that we're putting out in the environment with our bad deeds, and all of this wonderful things that we're creating in the environment with our good deeds, we think to ourselves, did the world become a better place because I lived this day? And what do I need to pull back on to change the trajectory of what I put out in the world this day? Ashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu. So Teshuvah Ma'asim Tovim become teris. They become a shield b'fnei hapuranut, in front of punishment in this world. Rabbi Yochanan HaSandlar then comes in and tells us that up until this point, we've spoken about a human being and what they've released into this world. You know, I think that aside from the angels that we talked about in this world, you know, we also read about the fact that in Shamayim, after 120, this army comes to greet him when he comes, or her, to Olam Haba. There's an amazing Gemara where the Gemara says that Rava, who was one of the Amoraim, wrote that Rav Oshia, who was a great scholar of the time, when he says, when I die, Rav Oshia is going to come out to greet me. Why? Because Rav Oshia had a teaching that Rava had interpreted and explained and defended from the others. He says, when I die, Rav Oshia himself is going to come forward to greet me. When you've done an act of kindness, so the father of Chesed in this world is whom? Avraham Avinu. Avraham himself will come to bring you, to welcome you into Gan Eden. If a person has managed to stick up for their morals in a very difficult time, Yitzchak Avinu will come to greet him. Asks Rabbi Pinchasi. He says, could you imagine all those actions? You protected Shabbat, Moshe Rabbeinu, that grandfather of yours that taught the family about Bikur Cholim, or about whatever the mitzvah was. And they all come out to greet you as your neshama is coming up to heavens, and you could hear the violins. And all of a sudden, another troop comes. And this beautiful family / tzaddik reunion is met with angry protesters holding signs. Could you imagine that? The Mishnah here is telling us that there's a way to rewrite our reality. And that is the process of teshuvah. But the question I was bothered with is, why does he say teshuvah uma'asim tovim? Because we started off by talking about good deeds. Then we carried on and talked about bad deeds. So teshuvah, I understand, is this thing that fixes bad deeds. I get it. But why does it say teshuvah uma'asim tovim? Ma'asim tovim is already the good angels. And I think that there's something very beautiful here. You know, in the pasuk tells us, Sur mera ve'aseh tov. Sur mera means turn away from evil, and aseh tov means do good. Which one comes first? Sorry? Sur Merah, turning away from evil. So let's say, as an example, I'm a thief. I'm running a company, stealing money from my investors, robbing the public blind with my overinflated prices, right? Do you think it's a mitzvah for me to give tzedakah from my ill-gotten gains? Of course not. First, Sur Merah, yeah? Then, Aseto, before you give charity, return the money that's not yours. Don't give us charity in the synagogue here from money that actually belongs to somebody else. Right? But what the Mishnah is teaching us is there are times in a person's life where they are incapable of suring merah. They're too ingrained in their negative traits. Let's say, as an example, a person has become a smoker. Every day, a pack a day, they're smoking a pack of cigarettes. This guy can't breathe. Comes COVID, comes Corona, and says, hello. And his wife and children say to him, you gotta stop smoking. COVID attacks the lungs. You're gonna be high risk. You gotta stop smoking, gotta stop smoking. The guy says, I don't know what you want from my life. He says, I can't stop smoking. I'm addicted. I smoke a pack a day every day. What do you want from me? This person is incapable of Sur Merah at this moment. So what does he do? What does his wife and children suggest? Aseh tov. Carry on smoking. But could you go to a meeting? Go as a smoker. Could you go? Aseh tov. Sometimes when we're not capable of not doing the thing that's wrong, the only way to turn the ship around is to actually just do positive deeds. And then when we're in a better space, then we can address the negative character traits. You know, you have a kid in school. The kid is causing all sorts of trouble. The kid feels that they're a terrible child. Tell the kid to stop being such a bad kid. The kid doesn't think he can. He thinks he's terrible. But if you could make him do something positive and then draw to his attention again and again and again and again, he's a good kid. 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 Eventually, you could say, you're a good kid. This is not you. And the kid actually buys it. Says the Mishnah, if you've created so much toxic nature in this world, what do you do? Teshuvah, that's the answer. But what if you can't? Ma'asim tovim. The guy's stolen from everybody. He can't return the money. He won't return the money. Get him to start giving charity. When he then feels like he's actually a good person, you can then say to him, you're such a charitable man. You're giving so much to people who maybe, you never met. Maybe we should have a conversation about trying to make good on the people that you crushed on the way to your success. It doesn't fit a man who's such a big, charitable, such a generous person to have that hanging over them. And from that place, that person can change. Rabbi Yochanan Sandlar then takes this individual idea and then he expands it to a group. Kol knesiyah shehi l'shem shamayim. Any group shehi l'shem shamayim that is for the sake of heaven, sofa litkayim. In the end, it will stand. Can I ask you a question? Do you guys know any shuls that are successful? Yeah, that have people coming all the time. Yeah, you know any shuls that are non-successful? That have lots of space but barely can string together a minyan until eventually they close? Lots of shuls, right? And one of the unfortunate realities in the Jewish community is that you have lots of charities trying to raise money to build buildings. To build buildings for charitable causes. When what the Jewish community is lacking oftentimes is not another building. There are plenty of empty buildings doing nothing that have barely a soul in their halls, right? The challenge is trying to put those good activities and match those good activities with the buildings. So Rabotai, and this is a very tough thing, the idea that an organization, a synagogue, a charity can survive, can last, you know what it requires? It requires that the people who are running it are l'shem shamayim. They have a united goal in their minds of what they're trying to do. When people are united in their goal, in their destination, then even if they have different ways of getting there, they can sit together under the same roof. And their differences wind up complementing one another and ensuring that their ultimate destination and their ultimate goal is furthered in the long run. Their differences complement, they harmonize. But when people have different agendas and different endpoints and destinations in mind, then even if they start off on the same path, ultimately they will be unable to stick together. Let's give an example. You have 2 or 3 people in a school. Each one of them is absolutely dedicated to educating the kids, each child according to their best learning capabilities and capacities. You have one teacher who's very focused on the children that are struggling in learning. You have another teacher that feels that we as a school need to provide excellence in education. So they're pushing for higher and higher and higher levels of education within the classroom. Those 2 teachers, even though one of them is bringing in remedial assistants, tutors to help, with reading disabilities, early recognition of difficulties in speech and in learning and in processing power, it's a very different direction. The other one is bringing in, higher testing scores and goals, and very different route. But ultimately, they are trying to create a school that has an excellence in education. That is its number one priority. The different paths complement one another until the school is a place of excellence in learning for whomever comes through its doors. You have other organizations where a bunch of people get together and one person decides they want to start a synagogue. Why? Because they want to have a Sephardic minyan. The second person who's there as part of the committee of the synagogue decides that they want to have a synagogue. You know why? Because they can't stand the rabbi of their old synagogue. I'm sure this never happens amongst the Jewish people. I'm just saying if. Okay? The third member wants to start the synagogue. You know why? Because he would like to be the president. The fourth member of the board or the committee decides they want to start the synagogue because the other one was already named. So he wants to name the synagogue after his grandfather. Each one of these people actually has a radically different vision for what the synagogue is and where it's supposed to go. And as you all know from any relationship you ever had in your life, is that living by yourself is relatively simple. The minute you introduce someone else wanting something else, even if it's just 2 of you, suddenly there's conflicting desires and conflicting angles and conflicting plans for dinner and conflicting vacation plans and conflicting education plans and conflicting religious levels, right? And it's a struggle to be able to make those 2 visions align in one home under one roof. You introduce children into that mix, and now there's people pulling in even more directions, correct? How much more so when they're not married and not blood related, and everyone wants something very different. One person, the only thing he wants is the synagogue to have notoriety. They want the synagogue in the newspaper every day, because if the whole point was to have his great-grandfather be the name to, have spread so then he wants that, have as much recognition. He wants the synagogue to have as many controversial policies as it can. He wants it every day to be bucking the trend, because that gets him more publicity. Right? The second person who wants the Sephardic minyan, right? All he wants is for the traditions of the synagogue to be upheld, of the community to be upheld. And any program which isn't Sephardic, he doesn't want to collaborate with, because it's not specifically Sephardic. You understand? You see how everyone is like literally, so I don't want to do that. It's not a Sephardic program. We're not bringing that into the synagogue. Yes, we are. And we want everyone to talk about the synagogue. The fourth guy actually couldn't care less. He's already president. The fifth guy doesn't want anything to do with it. You know why? Because the synagogue with the rabbi he hates, down the block that he left, the whole reason he left here for, this guy is already running the same program. I don't want him to do anything with them. See? The meetings are chaos. Ultimately, that synagogue falls apart because you can't have, the reins be pulled in 4 different directions. And slowly but surely that filters down to the people, and the people leave. They feel the nature, the toxic environment of a synagogue that doesn't have strong leadership, that doesn't have a unanimous goal with many different roads to get there. This is true about organizations, but it's also true about families. And it is an interesting thing that a lot of times people don't recognize that families are like corporations and businesses. And they don't realize that the same way a CEO needs to sit down and communicate the values of the company to the employees. Otherwise, they make mistakes. A father and mother also need to communicate in the home what the goal, what the vision of this family is. Otherwise, every kid is using the home for their own benefit, but doesn't understand what the price and what the commitment to the home is actually supposed to be. What do we stand for in this house? Which things can we not do, and which things do we have to do, even if they're very tough, because that's who we are. Says the Mishnah, Kol Knesiyah shehi l'shem shamayim, a home, a gathering, which is l'shem shamayim ultimately. And there's a beautiful example for this that Dubna Magid brings. He says, imagine a bunch of people are leaving work, and they all want to go to a restaurant down the block. Everyone brought their own car. Yeah? So I'm parked in the garage on 57th. You managed to find parking on the street. The other guy has an e-bike. The fourth person, right, is going to walk. We wind up, you walked through Central Park, the guy with the bike went on the bike path, the person on 57th had to make a U-turn. Each one of these people, if you looked at them, they look like they're all heading off in different directions. But their goal, where they were heading, is the same restaurant. So however divergent their paths are, ultimately, they come together in the end. If everybody is heading to another place, even if they all turn down 63rd Street, they all make a right together. And they all make a left on 5th Avenue together. And they all make another right, on 42nd Street. They all make a right together. And you think it's very predictable. I know exactly where they're heading. They're all heading to Penn Station. You think that they're all going to the same place. But then they get to a street corner where one person heads downtown and one person heads east, and another person jumps on the ferry, and another person finds his car, and actually they wind up that evening in very, very, very different locations. Sharing your common goal and destination and making sure that everyone is on the page with that. One of the things that was so important to me when I came to the synagogue, 2.5 years ago, was explaining and trying to communicate that what sparks the fire in my soul, and that's really how a person should really decide if you have a passionate thing that you want to give your whole life to. It should be something that makes you feel alive, that really speaks to you. This job, you can't give the amount of time that you give it unless, and give it wholeheartedly unless it really speaks to you. And I said to them, look, I'm coming from a different background than the job position necessarily asks for. Like, you would think that a rabbi of a synagogue would hire a rabbi who had previously had experience as the rabbi of a synagogue. And I explained to them that when I'm coming to take this job, of course I want to be the rabbi of a synagogue, but I also want to be somebody that is literally pushing the doors open and trying to go out into the streets and bring people into the classes and to the programs that have had no exposure before. I don't want to be sat on the stage presiding over a congregation that comes in for Shachrit, Mincha, and Arbi. That's not what held any allure to me. It doesn't matter to me the name of the synagogue that I wanted to be the rabbi of. I don't mind if it's in Fifth Avenue or if it's in some back street in London. It doesn't make a difference. For me, the exciting thing was to bring people into synagogue and to religion and into connection with Hashem that had not had that before. And that's something which is true on every level. So that can be the way you approach being the rabbi of a synagogue, by trying to communicate with the kids. We didn't have a kids minyan that was really functioning. That's part of outreach too. Trying to get women to come to classes. If they weren't coming before, that's outreach too. It doesn't only mean, right? But it means that that's where you're coming from. That's the destination, is to make this place a place where HaKadosh Baruch Hu feels, when he looks down on this island, he sees that there's a place where the community, the rabbis, the staff, everybody feels incredibly welcome. I just got a message only yesterday from a young woman who says, I feel like I shouldn't have waited so long to send this to you, but I want to tell you how thankful I am to the community and to the synagogue and to the staff. She says, I'm not someone who grew up religious. I've started attending classes, and now I'm coming to prayers and everything. She says, I've never in my life been made to feel more welcome than by this community. What a wonderful thing to read. If that's the destination, then everything you do complements that destination. The prayers become something that invite people in. How do prayers become something that welcome people who know nothing in? How do you do that? By definition, prayers are really geared to people who only speak Hebrew, right? There's a lot of little ways to do it. By having Hebrew English prayer books in the back of the room. By having someone come up to you in the prayer and say, this is the page that we're on. By having Rabbi Friedman, who teaches the Talmud class here in the morning, such a wonderful, warm man, coming up to somebody and saying, let me fix your tefillin. Do you want to get them checked? By having the synagogue have someone reach out to us and say, I'd like to sponsor a Shatner's checking day. Because lots of people don't know about the mitzvah. I'll take on the expenses. I'll pay for every beged, every article of clothing they want to have checked. Let me remove as many barriers for entry. What a beautiful thing to have a concerted effort by rabbis, by the staff, by the synagogue, by the members of the synagogue, just doing everything they can to make this place, ki beti bet tefillah yikareh l'chol ha'amim, for my house is a house of prayer. It shall be called l'chol ha'amim, for all of the nations. What does your family stand for? The organizations that you're involved in, what do they stand for? Is it l'shem shamayim? Or is it ego-driven, agenda-driven? Ultimately, human beings get to make a choice. Who is at the center of their world? Is it them or is it Hashem? That's why when God, for the very first commandment that he ever gave this world, his very first word in the Aseret HaDibrot was, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. I am Hashem your God. There should only be one I in our vocabulary, and that is Anochi Hashem Elokecha. I am Hashem your God. If godliness resides at the core of our motivations, if that is our destination, then all we do all day long is L'Shem Shamayim. All we do all day long is produce more and more good energy in this world. Angels of positivity. We communicate to other people. There's a pizza shop that I read about that has an entire wall. And you know what the wall is filled with? Post-it notes. And you know what it says on each post-it note? It says one slice of pizza. That people can walk in and someone is sponsored When they bought a slice of pizza, they bought two. They ate one themselves, and they put one sticky one on the wall so that someone who walks in can grab a Post-it note off the wall and bring it to the pizza shop station. What an amazing thing to turn a pizza shop into a hub of chesed. I worked with an organization in London called GIFT, right? Literally, GIFT stands for Give It Forward Today. And so brilliant. One of the core principles of this organization is that they exist not to raise money for charity, because that's a finite thing. How much money can you raise? They exist to invest in charity. So instead of spending $100 on food, they'll spend $10 on a garbage can, and then cover the garbage can with a beautiful decal, a sticker from GIFT, and it says, right there, it says BOGO, but not buy one, get one, buy one, give one. You're in the supermarket, you bought tuna fish, buy two. One for your family, one for another person's family. And people are throwing in this garbage bag, this garbage bin, in a grocery store. Not extra stuff you have at home. You're buying it off the shelf. If I want one, whatever I like, let me give to someone else as well. Beautiful thing. So instead of spending $100 on the grocery that they would need to fill the garbage can, they spend $10. And you know the beautiful thing is, you empty that garbage can, and then it gets filled up again, and again, and again, and again. It's a magnificent thing. And they have volunteers packing the bags, volunteers dropping the bags off at people's homes. When people are driven by L'Shem Shamayim, suddenly they create systems around them, armies around them, armies for good. I felt when we had that program here, the giving the gift of warmth, everyone came together, families, that packed the bags, and the bags were packed, and we gave everyone the marching orders, and every kid and their mother and their father and young singles came and picked the bag, remember? And they hit the streets. And I just, in my mind's eye, because I'm a really visual person, I just imagined that just like spreading. Everybody heading to another street to find another person who was homeless and freezing. But think of that army spreading from this place. What a beautiful thing it is to build something where the core of it is not an I in terms of me and my agenda, but an I in terms of I am Hashem, your God. What can we build in this world that will outlive us? That will be a force for good long after we are gone. That's what the Mishnah is challenging us with. May Hashem bless us, each and every one of us in our own lives, to be able to become oceans that send wave after wave after wave to the shore of positivity and of mitzvot.